in the second part I want to look on the topic of the focus of contemplation, because when this is true, that what we should really do, how God shares and teaches us as humans, how we could engage the same mission and so on, we need to be rooted in the contemplative life. We need to be in touch with Himself, not only with information to share and to work on, but also to be in touch with the Lord, with goodness, with the inner life. And the inner life is always the difficult thing. It's not visible, it's hidden. Nobody knows how the other one is doing, of course, and thanks to God. But we have to care about our own inner life and the balance between the active life and the contemplative life. We as humans always feel ourselves like VIPs, very important people. We need to be at each project, we need to work on every task, and without myself nothing really works. Because I'm very important to run the whole thing, the project, the great mission, whatever. My thing which I do always seems most important. And the active life, actually, it's also the missionary life, going out, comes as the first instance to challenge our inner life, our contemplative life. It's not only that we have the challenge on our timetable and on our calendar with all the appointments and everything, but it challenges us first inwardly, in the inner life, in the contemplation. And for us, it's the best excuse actually to spend less time in prayer, in contemplation, and on our own sanctification, which is more boring. It seems to us more useless, and so on. It's the best excuse always. No, I cannot pray now, I cannot be before the Blessed Sacrament and so on, because I have to do this task, I have to save the world. But in fact, the missionary life, the going out, the active life, is also a task of the Lord Himself. So it's not only that we imagine we are so important, it's also a mission which is entrusted from Christ to us. He says to the disciples, "Go teach all nations, make all men to be my disciples," and so on. So this is also a thing which is on our life. He calls us as well to be in a missionary state. We have more a missionary vocation than a contemplative vocation. Also nowadays, most monasteries are not only contemplative. Here in Gaming you have the great honor and privilege to live in a contemplative atmosphere which is formed through hundreds of years of prayer. Like you can smell it, you inhale it every day when you wake up until the end of the day. It's wonderful actually, and if you know also like Cambridge and Oxford, the great universities, in former days study life was like a monastic life, kind of. When you read the diary of Newman, John Henry Newman, he describes it very detailed how life was as a student. Actually, I thought he was in a monastery. When he engaged Oxford, everything is so monastic. There's prayer and there's study. It's connected, bound together, and one thing doesn't work without the other thing. So the missionary life, the active life without the contemplation, That's the problem, brings only a superficial piety. The human person is formed, okay, but only in the mind, not in the heart, and the whole life, the whole being, the whole actions which come up out of the formation is superficial. I want to share a quote here with you from Chateau. And he says, "But there is not another cause to be traced to the fact that we priests and educators, because we lack an intensive inner life, are unable to beget in souls anything more than a surface, superficial piety, without any powerful ideas or strong convictions. Those of us who are professors, have we not perhaps been more ambitious to the distinction of degrees and for reputations of our colleges than to impart a solid religious instruction to souls? Have we not worn ourselves out on less important things than forming of wills, and imprinting on well-tried characters the stamp of Jesus Christ? And has not the most frequent cause of this mediocrity been the common banality of our inner life?" So the thing is, this is the highest art of forming souls. Not information, not logic, but it's a forming of an inner life, a forming of a contemplative soul. We are always poor in our contemplative life, but on the other hand, we cannot give what we didn't receive ourselves. A thing which you do not cultivate in your own life, you cannot cultivate in other lives. It's always the same. And there's a saying of qualis pastor, talis parochia. So as the shepherd, so is the flock. Or like also your students, in a way, not only, but in a way they reflect your own inner state. If you are calm and balanced, students are much more likely to be as you are. Aquinas says, and he refers it to God, he says, to bring God a sacrifice is to bring something for his glory. And the highest glory is the salvation of a soul. But everyone has to bring his own soul first. Or like St. Alphonse of Liguori says, I love Jesus Christ and I strive to bring him souls. First my own, and then many others. So it's like to make a way myself, and then I can open the way up to many others. We want to give everyone a drink, but we have to drink first. It's the priority. You cannot save anyone if you're not saved by yourself. And in fact, God actually saves us in this way, that he makes us saviors for others. So it's kind of combined mission through our own path of salvation. He saves our own souls. But the thing is, we have to receive salvation, we have to receive his glory, his life, his grace first. A mother has to drink and eat first herself before she can give a drink to her child, like with breastfeeding. If the mother doesn't drink herself, she cannot give what she didn't receive. God prefer. So then, change here. And so it's a combination, active life, contemplative life. and to bring a balance between both the mission and the contemplation is one of the great tasks for ourselves, for each Christian person. So the active life, if it's right, it has to be an outflow of the contemplative life, a little side effect of the contemplative, of your own inner life. It's a result of your interior life. First and foremost, we have to care about the inner life ourselves. And if this works out, or if God wants, He makes great things out of it. My favorite passage of the Gospel, in the Gospel about the vocation of the disciples, is always Mark 3:13, where it's written, "The Lord went up into a mountain and called unto him whom he would, and they came unto him. And he ordained 12 that they should be with him, and that he might send them forth to preach." So the focus or the strong moment is always he called unto him. He called them to himself. And actually the calling of Christ to himself, it's very specific for Christianity. All the other religions, they guide to somewhere else. If you ask yourself what's about Buddhism, then they say, yeah, it's about a peace, a combination of which you have to bring together, and you lose your mind and you go into the nirvana, and then that's the aim. Like even Judaism, when you ask what's the purpose of Judaism, of course, the relation to God, but then there's the law which you have to achieve, which you have to fulfill. It's not so, the relation to the Lord is not so central as it is in Christianity, but the Christianity is always about ego e me. It's me. Come to me. And it's always if you look a little bit at the Gospels, it's always the big invitation of Christ to enter into this one only relation with Him. If we ask ourselves, how can we combine, how should we unite both the active and the contemplative life? One of the great passages is where the Lord engages Martha and Mary, and then He says to Martha, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one." So the logic behind, you can analyze it in many ways, but one thing is, there's the inner life, the contemplative life, which is united. And the accusation of the Lord to Martha is more, you care about many things. You are not united in your being, in your caring, in your heart, in your life. So the dividing moment, the division in itself is always diabolic. Like when the other man who is possessed says, we are legion because we are many. It's always like the devil scatters and God unites things together. Unites a person, unites hearts, unites a community. So the coming into one is the power of God. The spreading out in 100 things is the task, the mission of the devil. Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things. About many things. Her heart, her life is scattered. Meister Eckhart says, a saint is a person whose life is about one thing only. Whose life is about one thing only. A saint cares about one thing. So cool. So easy, it seems. But so the combination, like the one thing which we have to achieve, or which is indeed needed, this one thing, like is the source, brings out all the other missions, tasks, things which we have to achieve. It's more ontological mission, rather ontological mission, not a labor mission. Edith Stein says she was part of a great woman movement between the two wars, and she says once to women, it's too less if you give the world what you do, give the world what you are. So your own identity, your own heart, your own being. But that needs to be united first in yourself. The order of the contemplative and the active life is to be the order and relation of one to another is the important thing. And Aquinas says there is a dynamic of contemplation. He says whenever you're rooted in the contemplative life, the active life doesn't destroy it anymore or diminishes it. But when you are rooted there, the active life becomes an addition or enrichment to the contemplative life. So a person who is centered in the Lord, who is connected or has achieved the real inner life, the active things, everything which we have to do is an enrichment. It doesn't destroy or interrogate you in the inner life. A wonderful quote from the Song of Songs 8:6 is, "Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm." So the heart needs to be stamped first, the seal, and out of that the arm will be also sealed. So the active life will be sealed out from the contemplative life. As the arm is connected with your heart, so your life outwardly is normally connected with your heart. And the connection of arm and heart, which both need to be sealed, of course, cannot be only like Christians in our heart, not in the world, not in the active life. But the connection of heart and arm is the most important thing. Whatever God has connected, we must not separate. The union of two lives, contemplative and active, says Aquinas, constitutes the true apostolate, the chief work of Christianity. So the union of both, contemplative and active life, is the chief work of Christianity. So, if we are really rooted in the Lord, everything else flows out of it. We do not have to care too much about the active life anymore. And the relation of one to another is most important. So the intensive prayer, that the soul is really habitually living in a life of prayer and doing so with sufficient intensity not to need to draw upon anything but its surplus for others. So it's like you need to be a container rather than a channel. A container always cares that he gets filled. When it's filled, the container is filled, okay, it flows out of it. And the channel cannot hold anything for itself. It's only there that everything goes through, that actually the channel itself is empty. without the source, without the fountain. So the action which we do must not supersede the life of prayer. And the soul, while spending itself, must be so well trained in keeping watch over its heart that it runs no risk to withdraw its actions from the influence of Christ. So whenever action or the active life becomes too intense, or as a cause of separating us between God and our life, to separate us from God, I have to say, the Lord lets the thing, the action, the work, the mission go. So normally, He never cares about the mission, He cares more about our hearts. He cares more about our contemplative life than about our active one. And the question is if we can connect it, make the right relation of one to another. Is there a question to this part? Otherwise, I have two questions which I want to share with you before the time of contemplation. Is it understandable? I hope so. Okay. Two questions for the time of prayer now. One question is, where do I violate the inner life on account of the active one? We all have it. We all have it. And the second question which I want to share with you is, where is the unity missing between the active life and the contemplative one? So the first is, where do I violate the inner life on account of the active life? And the second is, where is the unity missing between the active life and the contemplative life? I work out of my own power. I work out of myself, and my life doesn't flow out of the inner life, of the life of prayer.